Gabrielle Blake. She is obviously a member here at Church Street, as well as a good friend of mine. So I do want to say she is a very accomplished person as well. And again, this is a very short bio of all that she does. But Gabe has been a member of Church Street since 2016. She's worked as a licensed clinical social worker with Franklin and Kyle Elder Law since 2010. In 2022, she was awarded the John J. Duncan Senior Award for Senior Advocacy. She's a certified dementia practitioner by the National Council for Certified Dementia Practitioners. Please help me welcome Gabrielle Blake.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to just do whatever Dr. Crane did and use this thing. So can everyone hear me okay? Good. I was talking earlier, just like Valerie said, we have looked forward to this for 3 years. And I'm reminded that our timing is not God's timing. I'm reminded of that pretty often. But I have seen caregiving have so many more challenges in the last 2.5 years with COVID. So maybe this is more timely of an experience for us today. If you have not already signed up to attend next week, we hope that you will do so as well. Little disclosures, I am a social worker. We started out today hearing from Dr. Crane taking the medical side, and Verna and I are social workers. It's one of the many reasons we love each other so much, right, Verna? So I work with an elder law attorney, but I am not an attorney. We are going to talk about some legal documents, but we're going to talk about them from the social work side. And these are some conversations that I have with some of our clients doing some pre-planning and to maybe give you some ideas of things to talk to your family about and your legal team about. We're going to take questions at the end, just like we did with Dr. Crane. If you want a copy of my PowerPoint, my email is in the last slide, and also I'm not going anywhere. I'm a member of the church, so I'm happy to be a resource for you. So who are we talking to today? Who are the caregivers in this room? If you are either an informal caregiver, which means that you're not paid, which I think that's probably the wrong term, but if you're not paid, if you are a volunteer, even with like Stephen Ministry would count, or if you are a paid caregiver, raise your hand. That's exactly what I expected, right? Most of us in this room are caregivers. But I love this quote by First Lady Rosalind Carter because it speaks to the universal nature of caregiving. If you haven't served as a caregiver, just wait, right? If you haven't yet received care, just wait. Across cultures, across times, at some point or another, we will be on both sides of that coin. And it is our hope today and next week is that we give you some language that allows you to care with that care recipient, not to. And so as you're thinking about that and as you're thinking about that experience, think about it more as a partnership. I hope that makes sense. And I think you'll see it a little bit more as we go throughout the next couple of weeks. Caregivers are faced with unique challenges. Compared to their cohorts, they have a higher prevalence of issues related to the mind, the body, and the spirit. We know that the longer a person gives care, the higher likelihood of things like cardiovascular illness, or even musculoskeletal problems. Because if you've given care, there's a lot of physical work that goes in with that. And we hear a lot about caregiver burnout and depression and anxiety. So caregivers are facing challenges, and as great as our church is, as many resources as we have, we do so much more than any other church I've ever been in, but folks, we can do better. All of us. That's my charge to each and every one of you, no matter what your age is that if there is someone in this church you haven't seen in a while, reach out to them and say hello. Because like our speakers today in Sunday school said, they're not always the people who are here in the pews. These are the people who haven't been here for either COVID risk or just because their situations have changed. Caregivers often think that the caregiving experience is going to be relatively short. If you watch a medical show on television, in the first 5 minutes, someone's gotten a diagnosis, and 30 minutes later, they've died, right? Isn't that what it's like? That's not reality. And as Dr. Crane said, a person may be living with a neurocognitive disorder for 20 plus years. And your caregiving experience might start out like I'm taking off work to take mom to the doctor's office. But in the last few years of a person's life, in the last 3 years statistically, it's hands-on care. That's bathing, dressing, toileting, feeding. This is not going over and bringing supper. And most often, that ends up taking place inside of a nursing home setting. If you have not yet promised, Mama, I'm never going to take you to the nursing home, just not ever going to do it, please don't make that promise. When you don't know what that illness is going to be like towards the end, heck, you don't know what you're going to be like towards the end. I see a large amount of our care partners passing before the identified patient, before that person, because it is so hard. Now, if you've made the promise, cross that bridge when you get to it. Verna's going to talk a little bit more about that later on. This is the elder care continuum. It is a visual representation not only of your decline over time, but what programs are there and the financial cost. I could have done another hour talking about financial resources and financial planning. If we do this again next year, where's Valerie? If Valerie, she's like, no, I don't know. Don't even start talking. Yeah. Valerie's our fearless leader, y'all. We'll talk about financial planning later. But that's the importance of talking to an attorney, seeking good counsel. The Bible talks a lot about that, so do some pre-planning for it. People think it's either I'm at home or I'm at the nursing home. And people forget there's a lot in between. And this shows us that. Now, Verna's going to talk about some of these pieces, but our office talks a lot about letting care drive the bus. As counterintuitive as it sounds, when you get the help you need when you need it, you actually stay independent longer. And if you don't believe me, I can tell you about so many of my clients who, at the beginning of the pandemic, they said, oh, people are dying left and right in nursing homes, assisted livings, I'm going to take my mama out, and we're going to be at home. No judgment. If my dad had been living, I would have done the same thing. But we thought this thing was going to blow over, right? I've worked in healthcare for 26 years, and I'm like, oh, it'll get hot outside, no big deal. Here we are 2.5 years later, and some of those clients are still just like hunkered down, like when it's done, I will just bring that person back. But the problem is that when we're not getting that health care, when we're not getting that assistance, those illnesses advance so much higher. It's such a faster rate. So get the care you need. That may be in assisted living like Megan works at. And it may not be as restricted as you think it's going to be. Told you that I work in a law firm, so, I think you need your legal documents. The big 3 legal documents are the will, this is in another slide, the durable power of attorney for finances, and the advance directive and appointment of healthcare agent. Now that last one is like a combo document of the living will and the healthcare power of attorney. Okay. That's a social work term. It's combo document. Those of you who are attorneys in this room, do not tell Mr. Glenn Kyle that I used that word, okay? How many people in this room over the age of 18 have all three of those documents? Ooh, that's actually a good amount of people. Normally when I do this, it's never more than half. And even if you looked around, it was still about half. And I think it's important to note that more times than not, I'm speaking with people who are in the healthcare service industry. People who every single day see what's happened when a person doesn't have these documents. My daughter Hannah, she's 16. She knows when she turns 18, we're going down to the attorney's office and she's going to get at the least those 2 power of attorney documents. So this is what they are. I'm going to go talk about them, and again, not an attorney. If you do not have the funds to seek counsel from an attorney, legal aid will do like the living wills. They'll even do a last will and testament at times. The UT Law Clinic and the Office on Aging will sometimes put on a legal clinic to help you with these. Okay. Donna, we're going to go wherever you are because it sounds fun. You're fun. Last will and testament. If you've read a John Grisham novel or watched a soap opera, you know what that is. It's who gets your stuff when you're gone. Again, see, that's a social work term. If you have a child, a minor child, I implore you, beg you to get a will. I've worked in mental health for most of my career, and I've seen what has happened when children do not have guardians. I implore you to get a will. The state of Tennessee has provisions for what happens if you die intestate, if you die without a will. That may or may not be what you want. Having a will helps. It helps also to have beneficiary designations on your account, so that's important too. Trusts, this one here, there are so many different kinds of trust. Again, not an attorney. The one part that I think applies when we are talking about caregiving is a supplemental needs trust that can be woven into your last will and testament. If you have a person who may inherit some of your assets and they are on a means-tested public benefit like Medicaid or VA aid and attendance, there are eligibility criteria for that. One is an asset cap. If you go over that amount, you risk losing your benefits. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'm going to tell about Aaron's aunt who was in the middle of chemotherapy and radiation treatment preparing for a mammogram. Her mom died. She had Medicaid. She inherited a modest amount, but it put her at risk of losing her insurance in the middle of cancer treatment. So that one is an important one to talk to your doctor about. Not your doctor, your attorney. The advance directive and appointment of healthcare agent, I'm going to talk about that one most because that's how social workers impact the most. But the idea behind it is in advance of needing the care, these are the directions I'm going to give people who will talk on my behalf if I'm unable to do so myself. I'm going to say that one because we'll have people call up and be like, I have power of attorney over my mama. Well, if mama can still talk and know what's going on, guess what? Mama gets to talk. Everyone has a right to make a bad decision too, y'all. That may not be what's in mama's best interest, but mama still can do that. If you do not have an advance directive, there's a backup in the state of Tennessee called the Healthcare Surrogacy Law. Has anyone heard of that? It says that if there's no one who is serving as the healthcare agent, and if that person can no longer talk for themselves, the physician can appoint someone to do that for them. Usually it's next of kin, right? Now, If we're in the emergency room and the doctor comes out to the waiting room and I've appointed Aaron, but Aaron is fussing and fighting with every other person who loves Gabrielle, then we might still have a problem. So that's why having these documents in place matters. The durable power of attorney for finances is who can make financial decisions for you. Now, a lot of times people say, well, my daughter is on my account. That's great, that's a starting place. But what happens when your daughter needs to sign a financial contract? Or your daughter needs to move money around? Or your daughter needs to talk to your financial advisor? Unlike the other two documents, this one does not have an easy backup. And what happens is devastating. You have to go through a conservatorship situation, which is when you basically go to court and take someone's rights away. It's expensive, and the lawyers, every lawyer I know who works with this jokes that no one wins but the lawyers. So if we can avoid it, if you don't do anything else that I tell you today, do that. Get that durable power of attorney for finances. You can print many of these documents online. They're worth the paper they're printed on if a financial institution will not accept them. Banks are getting more and more difficult, maybe the right word, and they are not accepting documents that are printed off of line because they don't want the liability of that. So check that out with your attorney. If you have not talked to an attorney about this, it's really important. Now, here are some considerations to write down before you meet with the attorney. It's just like when we are going to the doctor's office. It's really nice to have, a list of priorities. Here are some things to think about. First of all, believe it or not, your power of attorney needs to know they're your power of attorney. You laugh, but it's come up before. Your power of attorney also must be willing to serve as your power of attorney, also something that has come up. Think about it like it's a job. So if I'm picking my financial power of attorney and I have two daughters, which I have two daughters, and I say, oh, I love my daughters. I want them both to be my financial power of attorney. And one is, and this is not the reality with Hannah and Iris, but one is an accountant and one just got out of prison from fraud. I may love them both, but that is not the ideal situation. And you joke, but we had a lady who did that. And it's like, not the best one. Also, with the healthcare side, think about it as who is capable of doing the job. Y'all, I have to try really hard to be nice. It's just one of those things. I am not Jenny Cross. Jenny Cross, that lady, she just like walks in a room and you're like, oh, it's the nicest person ever. My sister's like that. She's one of those just golden people. I've worked in healthcare for a long time. I can compartmentalize. My sister can't. When my dad was dying in the hospital, I had a conversation with the doctor about changing his plan of care. I can remember everything about that conversation. We were in the hallway, first of all, which is always the great place to talk about your dad dying. The guy had on like one of those green Azon shirts with his collar popped. He just thought he was like, just amazing. And he said, your dad's dying. And I told the doctor, we need to move to comfort measures. That was one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had in my life. I still can remember all the feelings with that. If my sister Mary had to do it, it would have broken her. It would have broken her. So sometimes we think the most compassionate person in the family is who we want to be our healthcare power of attorney. That may not be fair to that person. Now, who in here has ever taken care of someone in the hospital? Raise your hand. Yeah, pretty much everyone. Donna is taking care of someone in the hospital. Do you just talk to the doctor and you go in for 15 minutes and then you leave? No. So you need to have someone who's kind of boots on the ground. My aunt has 3 kids. One is in California, one is in Prague. Those 2 people could serve as her financial power of attorney because there's lots of like electronic fancy things we can do. They're not the best people to serve as her healthcare power of attorney because at the best, it would take each of them like 5 hours to get here. So if you're able to pick someone who's local, and if you don't have someone local, have someone who's a boots on the ground person. So have someone who will go to the hospital that you can consult with. So they need to know that too. Then you need to go through the process of who can I talk to about this? Do I need to talk to my attorney about this? Do I need to talk to my medical team about it? And then it goes through even giving you some prompts to talking to those people about your needs and your wishes. And they're going to give you some really great even conversation starters to use because that's a question I get a lot. Well, you know, my husband, he doesn't want to talk about any of this stuff, so I have no idea what he wants. Well, it gives you some ideas on where to begin. And my advice to you is there are times your care partner may be so far into the illness that you just do not know, okay? And that's all right. Use what you do know about their personhood to help to make those decisions. Couple of just general ideas. Where is Susan Good? Where did she go? Anyway, I was talking to someone earlier and she said she really liked this idea of having a drawer. She has a folder. I think she called it her Kick the Bucket folder. I can't see her in the room. She's somewhere here. There she is. Wasn't it your Kick the Bucket folder or something like that? Okay, so kick the bucket, but haven't actually done that, but I can't make the decision. I'm going to use that from now on. I kind of like that. So somewhere in your house, you need to kind of start gathering this information up. Dave Ramsey calls it a legacy drawer. I really like her Kick the Bucket folder a lot better. And you don't have to do this all at once, but as you come across documents, make a point to put them in that place and let your healthcare agent, let your financial agent know where that is. On more than one occasion, I have had a client have to look through every single piece of paper in their parents' house. Aaron and I have lived in our home for 22-ish years. I cannot imagine our children have to look through every single paper in our home. So gather that together. And the big one I want to say here is long-term care policies. Everyone forgets about them. You have to pay them once or twice a year. People forget about them and they forget to tell their kids about them. So make sure that information's there. And then have a go back. My grandfather had renal failure. And they would make trips back and forth to the hospital a lot. My grandmother was a very regal real estate agent, right? And she gave me this idea of a go bag. Would anyone like to guess what was in her go bag? Okay, let me just tell you. I'm going to tell you. I'm glad you asked. A pair of clean underwear and her makeup kit. I guess she figured as long as she had her lipstick and rouge and a pair of clean underwear, she was good to go. But it's probably, definitely put your makeup in there. First thing I did when the babies went to go get cleaned up, was I put on my makeup because everyone's going to take pictures of me in the hospital bed right after 36 hours of labor. But whatever works for you. Make a point to have copies of those forms. Make a point to have copies of their medical information. Now, in your red bag, the parish health team put together a sheet of paper that you can use to put that information and have it readily available. So that is a great one. And, pay attention to privacy. You don't want to put your social security number in a bag that someone can steal. What does good care look like to you? Nancy, what does good care look like to you? First thing that comes up when I said that.
Loving family.
A loving family. Kylie, you're not off the hook. What does good care look like for you?
Support.
Support. Susan? Compassion. Yes, ma'am.
A safe environment.
A safe environment. Thank you. Julia, y'all said you were the rowdy table. What does good care look like to you? Or not the rowdy one, y'all were the popular. They were the popular table. Look at how many they have. And then when I went there and I was like, oh, you're the popular table, they were like, yeah, we don't have any more room for you. Okay. I don't know. Julia, what does good care look like to you? Clean. Any of that, for those of you who have those documents, is any of that written down in your advanced care directive? No, it's not. Care is more than what is if you want to be resuscitated or not. And while you can, when you can, start talking to your family members about what's important to you. Aaron already knows, I'm picking on you all day today, and he's used to it. Aaron already knows that I expect to get Mexican food once a month. If I'm on a soft diet, you can mush it up. If I'm on a low sodium diet, it's my happy food. I mean, go through those 5 senses. My uncle was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. I want you to get in your head what he was like. He was from Southeast Texas, which is probably saying enough. Everyone knows what Texans tend to be like. He was a cattle farmer and he was an attorney. So we got that picture in our head, right? Okay. So, all right, Uncle Danny, what kind of music you like? 1960s bebop music, got it. All right, what do you like to watch on television? Well, there was a Western playing on the TV screen, got it. We went through the list, and when I got to sense of smell, this big burly Texan said, you know what, Gabrielle? I really like that aromatherapy. Never would I have guessed that my Uncle Danny would have said, I didn't even know he knew what aromatherapy was. But it became the best tool for him. Because when he was in a persistent vegetative state at the end of his life, guess where the nurses in the nursing home wanted to come do their charting? The room that smelled good. And while they were in there, they would talk in it. They would check his pillows that they were fluffed. It became a wonderful tool that I never would have known about had I not had that conversation. And kids can do this. Now, this is going to blow your mind, but not only old people die, right? We had a good friend whose daughter died of cancer. I think she was like 8. We've had, Terry Shiva was 26. Start having these conversations with people in age-appropriate ways. You don't have to say, when you die, or what do you want? But age-appropriate ways. It's not only do you want to be resuscitated, it's under what circumstances do you want to be resuscitated. The lawyers roll their eyes when I ask them this, but it's much more important than whatever's on your living will. Full treatment, 3 approaches to care. If you have a post form, that's the physician's order of scope of treatment. Usually people who are in nursing homes and assisted living will have those. These are outlined. Full treatment means what you would think. You're taking a curative approach. You're throwing everything at that sucker to get it to go away. When I had breast cancer and was first diagnosed, we did chemotherapy, we did radiation, we did the whole 9 yards. Limited interventions are usually more chronic illnesses. My dad had congestive heart failure. That was not something we were going to cure, but we made efforts to keep it under wraps, so where he was able to have the best quality of life he could. Comfort measures is most closely associated with hospice care. It doesn't have to be hospice care. But at that point, we aren't treating illnesses aggressively. We're really more focused on comfort and pain relief. When would you want your plan of care to change? My dad had congestive heart failure. He did not take good care of himself throughout his life. He was in the hospital being treated for some pneumonia and congestive heart failure. We had plans for him to go do a little rehab and get better and get back home. Overnight, he had a massive heart attack. Heart attack. He was incoherent. His system was shutting down. Before that time, I had asked him, Dad, at what point would you want things to change? And he said, if I ever have to have dialysis, I want that to change. Now remember, I had mentioned my grandfather. He was dying of renal failure and had that old dialysis that was so hard on people's systems. And so for my dad, this was an emotional decision more than anything. But that was the line in the sand for him. So I'm having that conversation with that doctor that thinks he's a frat boy outside in the hallway telling me my dad's dying. And he said, you know what? We can keep him going for a couple of months. We can do some dialysis. I knew that my dad had made that decision to change his plan of care when that doctor said those words. And as hard as that conversation was, it was easier because I knew I was talking for my dad. The book, Being Mortal by Dr. Atul Gawande, and this is going to be in the last slide, it talks about the idea of this. And in it, one of his colleagues asked her dad, and he said something like, if I can watch football and eat ice cream, I'm okay. Life is worth living. And fast forward to the surgeon coming out in the middle of surgery and saying things aren't going to work. We have two options here. And she said, would making this decision give him a chance to eat ice cream and watch football? And that was how they went. A lot of times people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And a lot of times our clients want to change their plan of care before their care partners do. Do not forget that we have some really great resources through palliative care and hospice care. Now, Dr. Crane talked about neurocognitive disorders being this big umbrella. And under it, we have like Alzheimer's disease, frontal temporal dementia, Lewy body. Palliative care is like that. It's a much bigger term. It's much broader, where the idea is behind it is to alleviate suffering. So people who are doing chemotherapy can have palliative care. Hospice care is much more focused on end-of-life care. And everyone gets hung up on the idea of 6 months to live. That book, Hard Choices for Loving People, that I think Lori won, I don't know who won, Lori won. It's written by a chaplain with hospice, and he says the better question is, would it surprise you if your loved one passed away in 6 months? Because that question is much more indicative of chronological age and prognosis and response to treatment and all of those other pieces. So hospice can be a really great tool. I don't want you to eliminate that. But I also want you to know some people can't get over the hurdle of the word hospice. That's okay. You can still do comfort measures approach without having to be in hospice. But hospice does give you some extra resources and help. So how do we start these conversations? These are the three big approaches. And Conversation Project kind of goes through these. First of all, you have the rip off the Band-Aid approach. My friend Susie, Donna knows Susie, is a social worker who's retired. Through the Conversation Project's Let's Talk Turkey initiative, she sat everyone down after Thanksgiving dinner. And they were in the living room. And she's like, okay, we're all together. We're all going to talk about death. Can you imagine the indigestion you would have after that conversation? But I guess she just kind of said to them, nope, you're not going to get any pumpkin pie until you talk about this. And so they did. And I mean, it turned out great for them. She also followed it up by saying, okay, we talked about that. Let me let you know what I've done. Now, I don't foresee our family really wanting to sit down after Thanksgiving dinner and talk about that. But so the approach that I have taken is that second one. And that's like a little here, a little there. My dad was great about talking about his wishes with the stakeholders in their life. So my mom died when I was young. So it was me and my sister. We were the decision makers. But he also talked to his siblings and my cousins about his care. My uncle, Uncle Danny, who's the aromatherapy guy, he said he wanted every kind of treatment you could throw at him. Like if it was in the medical realm, he wanted it. My dad was different. My uncle could have, as my dad was dying, belittled me, said I was killing my dad. He could have done all of those things, but he didn't because my father had had the conversation with him. So how did my dad get to that point? Well, he had a geriatric social worker for a daughter. And as we would go to funerals, I'm going to try not to look at Pastor Catherine when I say this because she's going to talk about funerals later. We would be at a funeral and I'd say, Daddy, what'd you think about that? And he was like, do not sing that song at my funeral. Did you hear the way that person sang that song? Do not do that. We would watch a TV show. Hey, Dad, what do you think about that? It promoted discussion. And over that time, I knew what he did and didn't want. You are not going to be able to know everything. It is going to send you so many curveballs to be a caregiver. But having those conversations give you a glimpse into what you need. And the last one, I have some clients, Oak Ridge is right here, who are very tech savvy. They're very much like not touchy-feely, we'll just say that. And so they typed it out and sent an email. Can you imagine getting this email in your inbox of this is how I want to die, and these are the people I want you to know about. But it works for some of them. The most important thing is to follow up. Okay, we sat down after Thanksgiving. I want you to know I talked to my doctor about this. I got the lawyer. This is where my legacy drawer is. This is where my go bag is. Follow up and keep that conversation alive as it changes. So, it's not just the kick the bucket file. It's the kick the bucket and I'm not able to have decision-making capacity file. Sometimes people will include a handwritten letter to loved ones detailing what they do and do not want. These are those books I mentioned. Raise your hand if you're a Stephen Minister or Parish Health. Good. Okay. You have a homework assignment. As if I didn't give you enough homework, I want you to read the book, Being Mortal. It's a textbook. I make all of my interns read it because, they're college students and they don't have enough to read. Everyone in our firm has read it. It's just golden. The doctor is detailing his experience of his father dying through both that medical but also that emotional side. And that Hard Choices for Loving People is another, it's very thin, but it's another really good one. Okay. Trying to be mindful of your time. Questions? Okay, yes. You want to walk around with this? Joe could probably just like yell it out. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I'm Joe Terry. I'm a registered nurse and the Parish Health Ministry Team referral coordinator at Great Time. What we have found, both in my personal experience with my own family and in helping care for our loving church members, is that the given, there will be a crisis. Something will happen. And trying to help folks be proactive, have that backpack, those documents done, and to make safe, clean, healthy changes before the crisis happens is such a difficult place to achieve because we all want to deny that it's going to happen. Or we just can't face it. Or we love being at home and surrounded by all those things that bring back happy memories. So, any hints for us who serve in these positions to help family members and those we care for get out of the trench and do move forward?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, thank you guys for being Parish Health and Stephen ministers. When I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, I had a Stephen minister. And that person was a lifeline for me for a really long time. So thank you for that. First of all, this is mind-blowing information, but everyone in this room is going to die. Hate to break it to you. Had a client who, when you execute documents, it means you sign them, right? And they're not legal until they're signed, right? And so I said, hey, Mr. So-and-so, we keep calling you to come in and get your documents signed, and you, we hadn't been able to do that. What's the barrier? How can I help? He goes, you know what, Gabrielle? I'm not ready to use those yet. I was like, well, that's not the way it works. I think we all do that magical thinking, Joe, of like, if I don't talk about this, it's not going to happen. My experience is the people who talk about it have more options. The people who do planning have more options. It is so hard for me to work with clients who have very few options. So start now. That's the first one. So everyone in this room, you are responsible for doing that with your family. As far as getting out of the trenches, if you've received a diagnosis, at the time of your diagnosis, start thinking ahead. I didn't have my will in place when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer. I mean, I was just really doing great working in a law firm. I had the other two. That counts. 2 for 3 counts. But when I did get diagnosed, I went and got my will signed, and the peace that flowed over me was just amazing. So when you get a diagnosis, start being proactive. I had a client who's very young. A lot of times people with Parkinson's get it early, right? And his body was actually in really great health otherwise. He started having neurological changes and brain changes. And a lot of my work with that family was, okay, let's go tour some places. Because I wanted him to have as much decision as possible. Did that mean that that care community wasn't going to change by the time he needed it? No. But go in and see it, and then tell your family, you know what, I really liked that they had chandeliers, and you know what, I really liked that it was smaller. I always tell people when they go places, get them to feed you. Just saying, it matters. More complaints happen about the food than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I think meet people where they are and go with it because they may not be ready emotionally. What I find is two things. Number one, hope is built through action. When we do something, even when it is small, to improve our situation, we feel more hopeful about it. So for me, I couldn't change that I got breast cancer, but I could go and do that will. And that's why it made me feel more hopeful. Also, the other thing that I've learned in my life is that when I feel that sense of despair, sometimes it means I don't have enough information. And so providing people with information like today is a tangible tool that you can do. Yes, sir.
I'm Anthony Wilson. I'm a family medicine physician, but I don't pop my collar. I'm not nearly.
You're not. Okay, good. I knew I liked you.
I wanted to highlight what happens when you don't have these conversations and you come in, and what we have no choice as physicians to do. Default is full care, everything. Chest compressions, intubation, and all of that. So if that is something that you really don't want to have done, just because you've had a conversation with a family member, if I haven't heard it, I have to do everything.
That's such a great reminder. And I have, I tell all of our clients, when you have that annual exam, go over this with your doctor too. Because, people complain because when I go into the hospital, they're going to ask me if I have a living will, and why do they ask me? It's already in my EMR. They want to know if anything's changed. So yes, how many people in this room have ever given CPR? Do you know, so first of all, social workers in healthcare settings, we don't give CPR. We're like the ones who can call and we talk to people about, okay, we're going to stay calm. We're going to get out of the way, and we debrief, and how did you feel about that? And that's what social workers do. 2 times, you want to guess where I gave CPR? Church, not this church, but church. 1 time I had to give the Heimlich was in church. It is, when I gave CPR to the person, she was 90-ish years old. The entire time I was praying to God that I wasn't doing more harm than good. It was awful. I could hear, it was awful. And so talk to your physicians about what you do and do not want. You can get bracelets that are do not resuscitate. You can have the yellow dot through the Tennessee Department of Transportation. They have it on your car. You can put your post form on your refrigerator because that's where paramedics are kind of trained to go for some reason. I don't know if they want to get a snack while they're there, but that's where they go.